Happy New
It
Year.
is 7:31. And sorry, notifications on my computer. So I'm calling the meeting to order at 7:31. And immediately here, I'm going to make a motion to hold this board meeting through Zoom per the ongoing governor's recommendation to stay digital if we don't find it to be safe, feasible, et cetera, to meet in person. So that is the boat that we are still in. And is there a second for that motion?
I'll
Mitchell,
second.
second.
Ron.
Okay, I heard Braun first for the second. And hi, Julie, would you roll call the vote for that, please?
Ron,
Yes.
Mitchell,
Yes.
Morel,
Yes.
Rogers,
Yes.
and Gaines.
Yes. Great, and so citizen comments is happening now, and I don't know, let me get my, don't see anything in the chat. If anyone is here for citizen comment, feel free to turn your camera on, chime in. And Natalie, did we receive anything in advance?
No.
Okay, we'll just give it a few seconds here. All right, I don't think we have any citizen comments, and of course, we've got our section at the end as well. So moving on to approval of the minutes from the December 9th meeting, and I have a question. If one of us is not at a meeting, are we still in a position to vote to approve the minutes, or should we sit that vote out? Okay. So I will allow someone else to make a motion for that, and I will not be voting because I was not at the meeting.
Rogers moves approval of our meetings from our meeting minutes from December 9th, 2021.
Mitchell, second.
Great, and then Julie, if you'll roll call the vote.
Ron,
Yes.
Or I'm sorry, was there any discussion or issues with the minutes before we vote? Anybody? No, okay.
okay, Mitchell,
Yes.
Morel,
Yes.
and Rogers.
Yes.
All right, moving on to approval of the bills.
Okay, if you guys will go to the bills detail report. It's a interesting month in terms of bills because we have refunds and we have reissued checks, and it makes more sense if you're looking at the second page, which is the bills detail report. But I'll go through it from top to bottom with the unusuals. ASCAP is a license fee to play music at our concerts. As you go further down, Paul Brunger's a refund. Central Rug and Carpet, there's a second check that we would pay them when they completed the job. It's been the second half has been changed to $1,670.50. We'll get into more of that in my report. And the 2068 has been voided. And we reissued 1670. As we go further down, we go through a bunch of refunds. Amanda De Palma, Nicole, Desiree Posnick, Lisa De Batista, Leslie Garcia, Julie Goldberg are all refunds. We go further down, you'll see another reissue check. The reissue checks are checks that never got there. They were mailed in December or November because of the holidays. They're gone. So we're going to put a stop payment on those and reissue. As we go further down, there's another reissue with Kaplan, Saunders, and Valente. Then Jennifer Kyrus is a refund. Language in Action is a partner class. Lemoy, another reissue. Then there's Logan Consulting, which I think we'll probably discuss later. Then there's 3 refunds in a row. Sharon Myers, Hannah Moore, Erica Page, Mohammed. Nick and Ernie's is another reissue, lost check in the mail. The then a bunch of refunds to end this page. You'll see psychage in the middle of it. That's the last payment for the audit, which you approved last month. And then if you flip the page, the United States Post Office, $100 for our stamp machine. And then working gear is a winter clothing stipend that Jose, Marcos, and myself get. It's $1,000 total, and it's used to buy winter gear. So Jose and Marcos went to working gear. The one on Dempster closed, so they had to go way out to the western suburbs, Hanover Park, I believe, to get boots and coats and stuff like that. I went to Dick's Sporting Goods, bought sweatshirts, socks, and hats. That'll be in petty cash. So that's it for the bills.
So I would like to remove the bill for Logan Consulting before we approve the bills and pull that out for discussion.
Mitchell seconds.
That's not really I don't think that's a motion as such. I think it's just, since it's an omnibus, I believe I can just pull it off without a vote on it.
Okay.
Which item was that, Matt?
So there's
it's-
actually no motion right now.
Right, there is no motion.
So make a motion to approve all the bills except that one, which we'll deal with later.
Well, I was
There-
just,
there was
I
no
was just,
initial.
yes, I was just going to pull it off and then make a motion to approve the bills for the total amount minus that amount, and then we can come back to that one, if that's okay.
That's fine.
So, Julie, in order to answer your question, that's CA 21 for Logan Consulting in the amount of $2640.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, I will move approval of the bills for the month of, for the period ending, the period that's presented to us for January 13th meeting. Minus that is $27,996.12.
Ron, I'll second it.
Great. Are there any questions or issues with everything that remains on what we're voting on right now? I have a question, Brian. Is it, did you say it's around the holidays that we lose so many checks in the mail? It seems unusual to have so many.
This year we did, and there was documented other issues in Chicago area and around the United States with the same issue. So there was 5 or 6 checks that were approved in board meetings. They were bills, and Lamoille Hardware didn't get theirs. Local government health plan didn't get theirs. Kaplan didn't get theirs. Hinckley and Schmidt didn't get theirs, and Nick and Ernie, who repaired one of our trucks, didn't get theirs.
And did they all, did anyone add late fees because of not receiving the check, or did they understand that that was obviously not our fault, or?
Well, because Jerry, we get readouts from the bank of uncashed checks. And it was unusual that these uncashed checks were all businesses. So we contacted them. Actually, Nick and Ernie's contacted us. I will hand deliver 2 or 3 of these checks tomorrow instead of mailing them. But the other ones like Kaplan and Hinckley and local government, we have to mail.
Okay. All right, any other questions from anybody?
Yeah, Brian, is that just cold weather gear or is that a boot stipend as well for the guys?
I'm sorry?
That 71888,
Yeah,
is that boots as well, or is that just
Yeah.
cold weather gear?
that's steel toe boots, if they need them.
Okay.
If it's cold, winter coats, sweatshirts, hats,
Okay.
heavy duty gloves. We're doing the ice rink now. That's a big.
Sure. Do they get, how many times a year do they get boots?
They get the $350 stipend approximately once a year.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, and so the motion is currently to approve the bills minus Logan Consulting, correct? Okay, great. And Julie, if you would roll call the vote.
Yep. Ron,
Yes.
Mitchell, Sorry, Matt.
Yes.
Thank you. Morrell,
Yes.
Rogers,
Yes.
and Gaines.
Yes. Alrighty, moving on then to the approval of petty cash expenditures, and we can hear from you, Brian, on those first.
Okay, petty cash, Air Delights and soap for the no-touch dispensers in various parts of the building, including the washroom. So you don't have to touch it with your hands. You just go underneath and it with your hand, and a motion sensor picks it up. That's the soap that goes in there. Amazon.com is art supplies and children's masks that we need in the building for kids in class that don't have a mask, forget a mask, or kids in camp. Amex Plumbing was RPZ valve testing, which is annual, has to be done per city of Evanston. RPZ valve is what you put on the fire hydrant, so there's no backflow going back into the water system to contaminate it. Apple Incorporated is iPad memory. City of Evanston is the water hydrant permit. Dengio's, when we put up the rink on a windy, cold day, the crew had to work through lunch, so I bought them lunch. They had lunch, I did not. They enjoyed it very much, and I thank you. Dick's Sporting Goods is my winter clothing stipend. I spent $228. Dollar General Store is lunch for winter camp. When kids forget them, we bought a few supplies. So we had bread, peanut butter and jelly, things of that nature. Facebook is an ad. Jewel Osco supplies for winter camp. MailChimp emails over 2,000. Sam snacks for winter camp. And Woofu is our annual fee for our annual fee for camp and class registration online.
Thanks, Brian. Sorry.
I was gonna, Braun, make a motion to accept the petty cash in the amount of $1,316.58.
Correll seconds.
All right, any questions for Brian? I'm just curious, Brian, why your clothing goes in petty cash and the other two go in the bills?
Because I didn't want to drive out to Hanover Park and buy clothing at Working Gear. I didn't need steel toe boots. I had them, so I went to Dick's Sporting Goods and bought sweatshirts, lots of socks, hats.
Oh, okay, so it's just about like how you spent the money is where it
Right.
ends up. And
I went to a different store. We used to go to the Working Gear in Skokie on Dempster. It closed, so
Yeah.
So we go to the one in Hanover Park. This is the first year it happened.
And then I was just curious what the ad was that we ran on Facebook.
You have to, if Natalie's around, she could tell you real quick.
It was for winter break camp.
Oh, okay. Anybody else? Questions? Hi, Natalie.
Just real quick, did you get a good response, Natalie, on that ad?
Yeah, we did. We sold out the second week of camp. The first week was a little bit slower, but we had a really good turnout. And I get like data from the ad. It will show me how many people have seen it. And I think the reach was like over 1,500, which was good. So yeah, I
Yeah,
only
I just
spent
curious-
like
I just
25
curious.
bucks and I got, a pretty
Right.
good reach on it.
Mhm.
It says in the petty cash $1.28 for the ad. Yeah.
Yeah, so with the Facebook ads, I put in how much I want to spend. And over like the course of time, like I set it for how many days or weeks I want to run the ad and how much I want to spend per day. So the total spent is $25, but they charge us sometimes in increments. So I think the total invoice at the end of it was like $24.75 or something, but they may have just charged us like $1 or $2 at a time, which is really annoying. But we did just get the final invoice for the whole amount, so my guess is it'll probably be updated in the bills or incorporated in next next month.
Okay. Makes sense.
Mhm.
Anybody else? Any questions? For Woofu, did you say that is a charge For what period of time?
Annual.
Okay, okay. All right, unless anybody else has questions or issues, Debbie, you made the motion, right, for petty cash? Yeah, okay. So we're ready for you, Julie, please.
Braun,
Yes,
Mitchell,
Yes.
Morel,
Yes.
Rogers,
Yes.
and Gaines.
Yes. All right, moving on to monthly reports, and we'll hear from Brian first.
Okay, I hope everybody had a nice holiday season. I don't mean that sarcastically. We here at Ridgeville had quite a busy month with winter camp, carpet installation, illnesses, and ice rink setup and preparation. Winter camp went on right after the holidays. It went very well with Laura Downey directing. She was fantastic under trying COVID circumstances. She kept everyone in camp healthy through several daily guidelines and procedures. We had one child test positive on Thursday afternoon, January 6th. That was the second to last day of camp. Due to the positive test, we canceled camp on Friday, January 7th, and we'll be refunding those. You just saw those in the bills. Several staff had illnesses in their homes or relatives' homes, and some had the quarantine. This left the staff shorthanded. Other staff had bad colds and tested negative through their illness. At any rate, we prevailed and began winter class sessions on January 10th. It will take place under the new City of Evanston guidelines, which Natalie Salee will update for you in her report. We had new carpet installed on the second floor. It looks great. Our installers attempted to remove the stairway carpet from the first floor to the second floor. And what we believe to be asbestos tile was discovered on the floor. We stopped the carpet removal because the concern is that during carpet removal, you could disturb or break the tile and cause asbestos fibers to be released. The tile is currently in good shape. It's secure and covered with the original carpet. We will not disturb it until further research is done. My guess we'll have it professionally removed at a later date. We will have to schedule that time frame and budget for it. I'll find out a budget number for the 2022-2023 budget. It is currently not a danger. It's acceptable as is. In our bills, you'll see Sykes made we made the last payment to them, $2,100. Also, please note, we talked about this last month a little bit. IMRF employer contribution is now 4.39% for 2022. I believe that's the lowest in my time here at Ridgeville. The pension fund is currently funded at over 100%. I know the firemen and policemen are jealous of that one due to solid years of investment returns by the financial officers at IMRF. We also received two awards / rebates from our insurance affiliates, one from Illinois Public Risk Fund for $1,214 and the other from Illinois Parks Association Risk Services for $1,000. They are awarded in parts as rebates for a job well done at the Park District. The ice rink is very close to opening. That's wrong. It's already opened. We had maybe 4 days, 5 days, something like that. The maintenance crew has been layering the rink for several days. Kevin Williams is back as a part-time winter employee to help us with the ice rink, especially on the weekends. The crew also painted the conference room in 908 Seward, and it looks great. I will update you on the ice rink. We closed it today because it's 41 degrees out and the ice top layers are turning to puddles. So we'll look at that on a daily basis. My guess is we will try to layer it again on Saturday night. It depends on the weather. That's it.
Thank you, Brian. Anybody have any questions for him? All righty. Sorry, I'm dropping all my paperwork. Hold up.
Ice rink is good, Brian. I know I talked to you. I was out there skating with my daughter. couple days ago. We had a lot of fun. So thanks for that.
Appreciate it. We just need some consistent cold temperatures to keep it going.
Yeah, warmed up a little bit today again, right?
Yeah. 41 degrees.
I want the ice rink to stay frozen, but I also don't mind it warming up a little bit outside. All right, so moving on to the monthly report from Jerry. Hi, Jerry.
Hello, everybody. Happy New Year. Before I dive into the written report, which is pretty brief this month, there's 2 items of note that I didn't think to include on the report. We kind of have a developing situation with Cook County, excuse me, where we're being asked to provide access to our bank accounts so that they can deposit money into them for a new taxing authority agency. It's called the Ridgeville HACC Arrearage Agency, and it is in the same account as our park district. We don't understand what that is yet, and so perhaps more to come on that. The first notice we got was that there's $13.42 from the month of November that they're trying to give us, and in December there's another $63. So we have $76 pending in limbo somewhere as we try to understand what this is all about and what it means to us, or is it a mistake on their part? So just if anybody knows anything about HACC Arrearage, I think that's the Housing Authority of Cook County. We're not sure if it has something to do with the new Anne Rainey Apartments on Howard Street being in our district, or whether it's related to something else or what. So if anybody hears anything about it, it can shed light on it, let us know. But Charlie and I've had a couple conversations about it, trying to better understand what that is. For now, we've decided to just kind of monitor and see if we get more communications or the updates. What I don't want to do is give them access to our bank account information. The forms we have to sign don't make it clear what all they'll be doing, and we just want to go slow on that until we better understand what it is. Second thing is the state of Illinois has officially released the PTEL price increase, the CPI rate for the upcoming budget season. As you've seen in the news headlines, inflation last year ran at about 7%. PTEL caps out at 5%. So the rate for our budget increase next year has been set by the state to be capped at 5%, which is quite a bit more than we've had in a number of years. So that should be helpful when we get to budget season. Moving into the regular report, you've gotten copies of the appropriations ledger, the statement of receipts and disbursements, the outstanding unresolved items report, a balance sheet, and the Treasury Fund reconcilement as of December 31st. A quick run through some of the key points on there. As far as our tracking on the appropriations ordinance and our budget plan for expenditures, through December, the total expenditures are running about 40% of the planned annual budget, as compared with a targeted utilization at this time of year of about 46%, which suggests our spending is just slightly ahead of the plan, but pretty much overall, we're tracking good on the budget. No concerns there. In terms of the revenue side of the budget, through December, we've received about 44% of the total revenue for the year. With respect to program revenue, about 39% of the plan's been collected, and for tax revenues, about 45% has been collected. In terms of our cash position, the gap between our revenues and expenditures is currently running in a deficit of $40,000, which is comparable to our plan of expecting a $36,000 shortfall. So that $4,000 difference is not a significant concern at this time, given the large size of the dollar amounts that we'll still be receiving and expending in the months ahead. We're tracking just fine there. Our assets and liabilities increased from $861,000 at the end of November to $1,543,000 as of the end of December, due to the passage of the levy ordinance. which increases our taxes receivable and our deferred inflows. In terms of our cash and investments, our balance at Chase was down roughly 40,000 from the prior month. In other words, we're still drawing off our balances because we're not bringing in enough revenue to cover our expenditures. We'll probably see that turn around rather significantly in the next month and a half as the first installment of the 2021 property taxes starts to arrive. We're in a typical position for this time of year. And on the unresolved items, the report is looking much better than it did prior to the big motion last month that cleaned up a lot of the little things that had accumulated. We've only got one item that's stale by over 6 months, and almost all the rest of the items are within 60 days, which is a typical and optimal time frame for resolution of things. That's it.
Thank you, Jerry. Sorry, I don't know why it's taking me so long to turn those back on. I don't have any questions. Does anybody have any questions for Jerry? All righty. Thanks again. Moving on to Natalie's monthly report.
Okay. Winter break camp. We had a nearly sold out winter break camp, December 27th through the 30th and January 3rd through the 7th. Laura Downey did a terrific job as our camp director, keeping hands washed and masks up. The kids socially distanced as much as was possible in our indoor space. The weather was pretty warm the first week, so they played outside quite a bit, which they really enjoyed. They did lots of arts and craft projects as well. We did have to cancel, as Brian mentioned, the last day of camp because a camper had tested positive for COVID. We had made it clear to the families in the beginning that if there was a positive case with a camper, we would have to shut down due to staff exposure. So we did issue refunds for all of the families that were registered for that Friday. So we got real close. It was a good run. Half-day workshops. We did also cancel the half-day workshop that was scheduled for this Wednesday because District 65 canceled their school improvement day. We went ahead and issued refunds to all the families that were registered for the Wednesday half-day. Studio 908 winter session began on Sunday. We're offering 25 classes online, in studio, or outdoors. We're also hosting 5 partner programs this session. Registration is a bit low, but I'm not surprised just due to the weather and the surge in COVID. I will prorate class fees for anybody that wishes to join the session after the start date. The city of Evanston issued a vaccination mandate, which I attached to my report for you all to take a peek at. It applies to various indoor facilities, including recreation facilities. Thus, it applies to us. So part of the mandate says that staff has to provide proof of vaccine or a weekly proof of a negative COVID test. And it also states that any participants over the age of 5 have proof of vaccine. So I've made our patrons aware of that. I've included it on our registration forms and on our websites. The protocol for us is that they bring it to either they're bringing their card or a photograph of their card to their first class of the session to show the instructor. And so far, so good. There have been a couple instances where people were not vaccinated. They understood the mandate, and we will issue them a refund. So it does not apply to classes that are outdoors or online. So I'm not requiring proof of vaccine for those patrons or those instructors unless they choose to move their class indoors. Spring summer brochure, I signed off on that yesterday with Sarin, so it'll be mailed to homes in a couple of weeks. Sarin was a delight, as always. She's incredibly patient with me. I have COVID brain right now, so she was extra patient with me. So I'm very grateful to her. We were able to do the spring summer brochure in 12 pages again this year, which did save us a little bit of money in the budget. Looking ahead, I want to discuss expanding our brochure in the next fiscal year to include a Spanish section, a Spanish translation. Tracy Olasimbo and I have been discussing this in different ways to go about that. It will require that we bring on board a translator to do that, at least for the first brochure. A lot of the copy is repeat copy from brochure to brochure, so it wouldn't have to necessarily be completely translated every year, but it will cost a little money to get that done. In the meantime, I have included a line at the top of every page of this coming brochure with a sentence in Spanish offering people the option of texting me directly if they need a Spanish translation or of anything. So that's in this brochure, and we can talk about that more as we move forward and look at the budget for the next fiscal year. Outreach with Tracy. Tracy and I have taken some time off for the holidays. We've also taken turns having COVID, so I have requested that we push our meetings back. So she and I will be catching back up tomorrow and discussing some things. She's personally been working on our program data, organizing that from 2019, and I'm creating a social media schedule based on the calendar template that she gave me. And I look forward to seeing her tomorrow. That's it.
Sorry, I said thank you, Natalie, but I was muted still. Sorry about the COVID, and I hope you're feeling better.
Getting there.
Anybody have any questions for Natalie? All right.
You weren't testing the campers at Ridgeville, were you? This just the kid that got it had symptoms at home and just tested at home and reported it to you?
Yeah, their symptoms actually started while they were at camp.
Okay.
And, we made it real clear to families, like, if you don't feel good or if your child doesn't feel good, please keep them at home, just as a precaution. And so she actually had felt fine. And then kind of midway through the day started having a sniffle. So we let her parents know. They came and picked her up and then took her for a rapid test that came back positive. So we had to shut it down. And thank you to everybody who held down the fort. I was not able to be in the building at all for that second week of camp because I didn't feel well. I didn't get my positive test result until after, but luckily I had stayed home just as a precaution, and I'm glad that I did. But thanks to everybody, staff that helped facilitate that week of camp without me physically there.
Thank you for staying home too, Natalie, when you felt sick, even though you didn't know you had COVID yet, because that makes a big difference.
Yeah. If I have anything to pass on, do not leave your house if you don't feel well. I wouldn't be in this position if some others had followed that advice. It's important.
All righty. Moving on. We are, the Racial Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee update. Hey, JC.
Hi there. Happy New Year, everybody. I know it's not necessarily a healthy start for all of us to the new year, but hopefully it'll get better from here. So Dr. Logan has not signed the contract yet for the consultancy. Commissioner Mitchell is going to fill us in since he has a better understanding of what exactly is going on. Thank you.
So I've talked to all of the board members and Brian and Natalie. Brian asked me, Martha and I spoke today, is the board comfortable if I run point on this instead of Brian? I would deal with Charles and I would deal with Dr. Logan on behalf of the Park District.
Yeah, I'll just chime in that I talked to Matt Mitchell this afternoon or this evening before the meeting, and we just feel like we're hearing loud and clear from Brian and Natalie that they're out of their depth when it comes to legal negotiations and have been handling a ton of communication back and forth. So I talked to Matt about maybe one of us taking over. I'm happy to do it. Matt's happy as well. He's got, you know, the legal component ready to go there with some of the stuff that the average people don't necessarily understand. So I'm perfectly fine with Matt handling that communication for us. And if you would copy me, Matt, and obviously you can't link any other board members in with that, with the Open Meetings Act, but that way, as president, I can stay abreast of, you know, the ongoing communication, and we can just kind of hopefully wrap things up with Dr. Logan and allow Natalie and Brian to kind of take a break from that duty.
The rest of you comfortable with that?
I'm fine with it.
Okay. So I think there's three issues. One is I think everybody's frustrated that we don't have a contract with Logan Consulting at this point. I talked to Charles yesterday, trying to get to the bottom of what the hangups are and whether we can kind of get this done. That's issue one. Issue two is Logan Consulting sent an invoice for the total amount of $2,640, which I feel is excessive. So we have to decide whether to pay that invoice in full, not pay that invoice at all, or make a partial payment. So that, I think, is the second issue. Third issue is moving forward. Do we want to keep moving forward with Logan Consulting? And if we do, I think we need to have clear expectations of what our relationship is going to be going forward. And if I'm running point on this, this is not me giving my individual opinion, but speaking for the entire board. So what I would like is a consensus among us tonight of our plans moving forward. One, the invoice. Two, particular points on the contract. And three, our expectations of, I think, future billing is my concern. Anybody have anything else to add?
Well, Matt Rogers, I was wondering at what point in the meeting did you envision like discussing further, or did you want to just remove it from being approved and not necessarily discuss further? I wasn't totally clear.
I removed it so we could discuss it and was just waiting for you to bring it back. I assume we might come into that during this portion of the meeting. So that's the perfect time to talk about it. I mean, I've spoken, I think, with everybody individually about my feelings on this, but and sort of looking at the invoice that was presented to us, I'm a little concerned about this. Number one, in the simple fact that we're rapidly eating through money if indeed we intend to pay this bill, because we had $10,000 set aside, which only gave us about 66.5 hours of Dr. Logan's time. And with this invoice and the potential dollars that are still lined up in this invoice, we're looking at already eating up 20 hours of that before we've even begun any of the actual work that we're contracting him to do. So that's my major concern on this particular bill. When we were discussing how we were going to move forward with this, and there was discussion about him having a proposal that he was putting together versus us presenting an agreement through our attorney. We had several discussions before that meeting in November, and it was kind of left to my understanding that we were kind of giving him back those couple hours that he had used in working with staff when everybody sort of got a little bit ahead of themselves on getting this moving forward. I know there's lots of anticipation to get going on it, but we sort of started a little early, I think. And I'm not going to point fingers or blame anybody for that. I think it's just kind of a natural emotion. But in looking at the types of money that I was looking for us to have credited toward Dr. Logan being able to bill back to us, I was looking in the neighborhood of that $300 range, which would be 2 hours of his time at $150 an hour. So when I saw a bill for $2,640, that kind of stopped me in my tracks. And in looking at the sorts of things that we're being billed for, I don't feel this is standard operating procedure in business to bill for these things. As an independent contractor myself, I regularly put proposals out. I don't expect to be paid for my proposal. I expect to hopefully win the job, the whatever is I'm bidding on, and that's kind of a cost of doing business for me. And if I don't win that, I'm just kind of out that money. So that's kind of my feelings on this whole thing. And I cannot approve a $2,600 bill before we've even had him sit down and meet with the Ready Committee at all to begin doing the work of an equity consultant.
Anybody else?
I also feel that because the contract hasn't even been signed, that I can't understand why we're being billed for hours when there's no contract signed. And my feeling is that if a contract isn't signed, then the person doesn't make any money. I mean, I could go in and say, I bought pizza for the Park District, pay me. Well, I didn't have any contract to do that or any written agreement or anything. So I'm very concerned about it, and I also will not approve it.
Debbie, can I address some of that? And I don't disagree, Matt or Debbie, with your underlying discomfort. I think we should pay Dr. Logan for time that we engaged on him after we approved him as our consultant. If we asked him to come to meetings, if we asked him to do specific work, that's what we should pay for. I personally would like to salvage this relationship with him moving forward. And I think we're at a crossroads of whether that's going to happen or not. Moving towards that goal, I would be willing to pay 2 hours of his legal and 4.25 hours of his time. All right. I don't think we should pay for, I just want to be clear about what I'm saying. So I know that the invoice itself is not in the packet, but I think all the board members have a copy, and I think it should be included in the minutes so that if anybody is following along, they can understand what we're talking about. Assuming good faith. Charles, do you have something?
Yeah, I'll let you finish though.
So assuming good faith, this has gotten hung up. He has an attorney who's been dealing with Charles, and Charles is going to talk about that. I'm willing to pay 4.25 hours, and that is the last 3 line items on the invoice, along with 2 hours of attorney's fees. And that comes to $1,487.50. That's as high as I'm willing to go. I'm hearing from Matt and Debbie that 300 is the number that they're at. And I haven't heard from Martha or Mick yet. Yeah, Debbie.
I'd like to say that the reason that I don't agree with paying him is that he could have signed the contract and then put these bills forward for time that he supposedly spent doing equity work. I think that I would have a really hard time explaining to my constituents why I would agree to pay money for something that we really didn't agree to get. He didn't agree to give us, and I don't really know what we got from him. I also feel that I would be willing, if he agrees with the 300 instead of that 2000 something. And he says, okay, let's let this, be in the past. Let's move on with the work because the work's important. I would be willing to give him a chance and sign a year contract with him and to leave the clause in that he wants in and all of that. But I am really I'm really struggling with it. And I really think that if a contract isn't signed, I don't think we owe him the 300 either. It's what you do to get a job. Why are we going to pay everybody who comes in to do a job before they sign a contract for whatever they say they've done? And that's my feeling. That's how I would vote.
Charles?
If I could just add something here. First of all, the invoice that's being referred to was received, I believe, today. So that's why it was not publicly on the website for any members of the public who are listening or reviewing this later. But Commissioner Mitchell said that it should be attached to the minutes, so it will be publicly available. But that's why it wasn't previously publicly available.
Charles, can I correct you? I think it might have come on the 10th, 3 days ago.
Okay, but it was, I'm not sure, but whatever.
I never saw it
was,
today.
We didn't get it because it was late arriving, not necessarily late arriving, but it didn't arrive timely for us to release it. Second, in reviewing the invoice, my concern is, and this, if you're going to move forward with Dr. Logan, this needs to be made clear to him, is there's no indication from the invoice what hours were expended when, what days, and what work was done in those hours. So it's not clear. So, I can't review that bill as an objective person and decide all of this was work done for the Park District and it was useful or not. And I can't tell if some of it was just, I think Commissioner Rogers mentioned, is just the work that's put out there to get a job, which is different than work that's done on the job. And I just think that's a problem with the invoice. And, it's kind of hard to look at that invoice and say X should be paid or not paid. And I think we're within our rights to say, look, we need more specificity here so we know what you're asking for us to pay. But again, I'm just suggesting that you guys need to make decisions on how you want to move forward. But that would be my concern.
Mick or Martha?
Mick, did you want to jump in or not yet? Or
So as far as you taking the lead on this, I'm more than comfortable with that. And are you just saying from here forward, like after, based on whatever we decide tonight, you're just going to help out? Brian,
I'm trying to take this off Brian's plate.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. I think that's a great idea. I'm obviously been thinking about a lot about this. I've spoken with most of you, except for Martha, but I know we tried. My feelings echo what's been said tonight. Hold on, hon. I'm still kind of, I still just kind of struggle with the fact that that's so good, Mila. I still just kind of struggle with the fact that to me, this is what I think would be a kind of a low budget item for him. And kind of as far as what all the jobs that he takes and probably has. And I think for him to be kind of almost what it feels like sticking it to Ridgeville to try to get this money out of us before we start just kind of has left a little bit of a sour taste in my mouth. But I definitely can appreciate the work he's done. And I think he would be good for Ridgeville. I know I believe it's still the direction the Ready Committee wants to go. and I want to support them, just as I've said before. I want to support them and their choices. So hopefully we can both sides can come to an agreement here that we're happy with. Yeah, but if it's, I also want to thank Natalie and Brian for the extra work. I know they've been doing on this and to try to get this underway for the Park District.
Thanks, Mick. Mick brought up a great point, and JC, I'd like to ask you on behalf of the Ready Committee, do you want to still continue to move forward with Logan Consulting?
I cannot honestly answer that question. The Ready Committee has not met since, I think, October was our last meeting. With all the, a lot of this is outside of my realm of responsibility. So there's been details and such that have come my way, but I am just seeing the invoice for the first time now myself. I really would have to go back to the committee and fill them in on all these little details to see how they feel.
Okay. And what about personally?
I echo a lot of your concerns. I'm a little taken aback by this invoice. I think there's things on that invoice that I agree that as, somebody who has applied and interviewed, and I never gotten paid for any of that. So I have concerns about us missing out on the budget money that we worked hard to have set aside. And this isn't directed at anyone in particular, but I'm frustrated about the amount of time that has passed to still be in this boat and not be able, the amount of work that we could have gotten done in these last few months. I really think that's where I'm stuck. I think the time and the money is not reflecting what I chose to be in this position to do.
Okay, I think that's all real fair. Thank you.
Matt, can I just, one more thing? To me, the most important point that's been made so far has been what Matt Rogers said about if this money is spent, it's such a huge chunk of that $10,000 that we budgeted to help the Park District, to help the Ready Committee, help the Park District move forward and with equity, with the community, with all that, and it, to me, it's just right. It's backwards. And say if we were to pay that, right? Well, now, and we don't end up moving forward with Logan Consulting. Well, now, if we move forward with the next person, are we now we only have 2/3 of the money on the table to start with somebody new. So yeah, that just wanted to add that.
Of the board members, is the feeling that we would like to salvage this relationship and have an ongoing working relationship with Logan Consulting?
Well,
Go ahead, Debbie.
I was just going to say, I said it, if he's willing to agree that he takes 2 hours to pay for 2 billable hours to pay for the legal stuff and, and drops the rest of this, I'm willing to give him a chance, but I got to tell you that I'm a little concerned that this is happening and what may be in the future, but.
Okay. I say and Debbie, you and I spoke about this today. I'm on the same page, but my willingness to pay is higher. I'm willing to go up to almost $1,500 to try to salvage this relationship. And part of that is assuming good faith, assuming there's a cost to doing business, assuming there's a cost to starting over. I'm trying to be hopeful here.
Let me just say one more thing though.
Yeah.
The cost of doing business, we're already getting. We're paying our lawyer for this. So we're already, absorbing the cost of him doing business.
Sure. I'm just throwing out that there's some opportunity costs of having to start over. So I'm willing to try to make this work. What I'm hearing from everybody is that we're not willing to pay this full invoice. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to chime in here. I haven't, I talked to you, Matt, outside of the meeting, but I haven't had a chance to weigh in yet, in this particular discussion. I feel similarly to what's already been said in a lot of ways, so I don't want to reinvent the wheel too much. But when it comes to the specifics of what I feel comfortable paying Dr. Logan, it really boils down to, again, sort of like a good faith, goodwill, etc. Not because it's normal, not because this is the way we would have wanted to have things done. But given that there was some considerable, it sounds like, back and forth between Dr. Logan, JC as head of the Ready Committee, or chair is the technical term, and Natalie as well as a Ready member and staff member too, in an initial stage of trying to put together, and I don't know what it was called at the time, whether it was a contract or scope of work or proposal or whatever we want to call it, but basically really starting to nail down with Dr. Logan the specifics of the work that we hope to do with him as our consultant. Because of that time and effort that was put in, and a document that was put together, which it sounds like some or all parties at the time thought, amounted to a contract, and then Charles got involved, created more of a, legal based contract, which the benefit of moving forward is that we can use it for other contractors. So that's great. I mean, I fully support all of that so far. But again, and we've gone through this already at previous meetings, because of the work that was already done with Dr. Logan, JC, and Natalie in particular, I feel comfortable paying for 2, maybe even 3 hours at Dr. Logan's hourly rate. And that's it from where I sit or stand or whatever the case may be, because we're not in a contract with him yet. So we have no existing agreement about paying him any amount for any particular work. It's always a little dangerous for people to be doing work before an agreement has been reached. And we all, even though there's sort of confusion running around left and right here, unfortunately, on some of this, we all are on board and always have been on board with the fact that he is not currently contracted with us and has not ever been. We haven't reached that point with him yet. So it's very uncomfortable to me that we have somehow allegedly accrued 10.25 billable hours of work from him. I honestly don't know, beyond the back and forth with Natalie and JC, where that time went. And I have looked at the invoice and I'm still not clear, because it's talking about document analysis. What document analysis for 2 hours? It's talking about the interview. We don't pay people for the interviews for consultants. No one does that. So, I mean, this is all very confusing, why we're even being billed this much to begin with in terms of a dollar amount. But then it's also confusing why we're being billed this much, given that we have no contract in place with him. We have literally technically not agreed to pay him anything yet. And we chose him and voted unanimously to choose him because of how great we all felt about him in the interview that he did with us. And we spoke to him 2 years ago too. I mean, everybody knows that Dr. Logan does great work. So we felt great moving forward with him at that point in time. But I have to say that ever since voting unanimously to approve him, nothing has gone the way it's supposed to since then. And we still don't have a contract. So as you talked about initially, Matt, there's multiple things going on. One is the bill that we received. And in that context, there's the fact that he's trying to hold us accountable for his legal fees. I mean, I'm just not comfortable paying the legal fees that he chose to incur to have the contract reviewed that we supplied him with at all. I mean, I totally relate to that being a huge cost, but it's not our cost. So beyond the bill, which I've kind of gone over the two different components, the legal and the billable hours, there's the contract negotiation itself. And I wasn't privy to any of that conversation until the very end, where Matt Mitchell, apparently, who is more privy than any of us for some reason to those particular details, has informed us that there's one particular clause that Dr. Logan wants in there. I, for one, and I don't know if anyone has weighed in on this specifically yet, I'm absolutely fine with that clause. And I completely agreed with everything that Matt Mitchell said about that situation. And that reminds me that part of what I wanted to do tonight was to hear from Charlie as to why he has a problem with that clause being in there. So actually, Charlie, if you don't mind weighing in at this point.
Can I just try to clarify the issues here. I agree with you, Martha. We need to get there. But honestly, I don't see this relationship moving forward without a substantial agreement on this invoice. That's
Okay.
just my
I mean,
gut.
that's a good point. So it might just not even make sense to talk about the.
Yeah. So Martha, just from having heard you talk, what I'm hearing from Martha, Matt, and Debbie are at 2 hours billable. Martha said 2 to 3 hours billable.
So I guess if I could ask some clarification from staff, there's an hour and a half in his invoice, which is meetings in November and December with Natalie and Brian. And if they can share with us sort of what was the nature of those meetings, I might be willing to include that hour and a half in time, but that's kind of where I max out. I will not vote to approve any legal costs for him. That's just a non-starter for me. And I agree very much that whereas there is some detail listed in this invoice, it really doesn't give us a full picture of things. But if I could ask, I see Brian's unmuted himself, maybe he can just tell us kind of what they did when they met, that sort of stuff.
Sure. After the November meeting, the board instructed us to set up a meeting and try to get the contract completed, signed, and begin moving forward. So Natalie and I met with Dr. Logan, discussed several minor issues, and then we also did a Zoom in December, I believe, before the board meeting. I don't have the date, and we did a Zoom going over some areas that there was disagreement on the contract written by Charles, and so that in itself is an hour and a half for sure.
But that was all in discussions on the contract. That wasn't a discussion about how we moved forward in terms of working with the Ready Committee or anything like that.
No, I'm not a member of the Ready Committee, so I didn't have any discussion on that.
Yeah, I just didn't know if he had outlined sort of a vision for how he worked with the Ready Committee or anything like that in those conversations.
No, it was kind of a more get to know you and talk about the current contract from Charles.
All right, thanks.
I have a question, but I don't expect anyone can necessarily answer this, but something just occurred to me. Perhaps Dr. Logan was under the impression that he was already hired because we voted as a board unanimously to hire him, even though we're all, correct me if I'm wrong, under the understanding that it isn't until a contract is signed that we are in an official agreement with him.
But I can interject here because I made the motion, and the motion was to authorize the executive director to negotiate a contract. So it wasn't like we are hiring you was not the verbiage that was used,
right.
But we authorized to negotiate a contract, which was the step that was moving forward. So that's my interpretation of what I intended, and hopefully I put it in the correct words to make everyone else understood that's what I intended.
Right.
So I also, Martha, I think we should pay for any work that we ask to have done. Just good faith. We don't, if we had an agreement that we're asking him to do specific work, I think we should pay for it.
I agree. I mean, sorry, Debbie, go ahead, but you were on mute.
I was just saying, what work did he do that wasn't trying to get the job for him? That you wouldn't do?
It's not clear because, Charles's point that the invoice itself isn't that particular.
No, it's clear what you're saying. What you're saying is you think we should pay him for any work that we asked him to do that he did. What work?
Well,
if you're talking about negotiating a contract, that's
scope of work. If we're asking him about the scope of work of our agreement, I think that counts. I think meeting with the Ready Committee.
I mean, as I said earlier, I thought up until today that when JC and Natalie and Dr. Logan were going back and forth, I thought that was actually a meeting. And that's where I thought the basis for 2 or 3 hours of work put in, had come from. But it sounds like it was not a meeting. It was back and forth through email and maybe phone calls over a number of days. That kind of work, in my opinion, and I don't work as an independent contractor in a billable hours way, but that seems a little bit hard to put exactly a point on how many hours were put in. If Dr. Logan, like Dr. Effiam did, when she came to our ready meetings, when she came to our board meetings, that's very clear to all people involved that particular time and work is taking place. When somebody is just on their own schedule to do whatever work they as a consultant deem necessary, and then billing for it, that's it has the potential to get really confusing and uncomfortable, because unless he is, as you say, Matt, executing something specific that we asked him to do, and especially if we have some sort of sense from him as to how many hours it's going to cost, then before the work is even done, before the time is spent, we're all on the same page. But when we get an invoice like this and it shocks all of us, it's because except for a few hours here and there, like I said, 2 to 3 total, maybe as many as 4, and perhaps that can be laid down, in more specifics with him directly, because this conversation taking place without him isn't entirely fair. He can't, answer these questions that we have, at least not on the spot. But when an invoice comes and it shocks us this much, that's not a good sign. We were not all on the same page that we were going to be paying for this much time and this much work. I think also many of, if not all of us, agree that a lot of the work that we're allegedly being charged for is not the kind of work that we should be charged for, period. That's, in the realm of when consultants do this kind of work, that's on them to do that kind of prep, to do those proposals, to make quotes, to, do research on us as an institution to understand better who we are and how they might serve our purposes. That all falls into the realm of the kind of work that he, fairly did, but isn't fairly, holding us accountable for. So Debbie, to answer your question though, like what work did he do? I mean, I think the back and forth with Natalie and JC that did, it sounds like, result in a document that will be helpful towards sort of scope of work moving forward with Dr. Logan or someone else, especially because if we're paying him for that work, I would think that document belongs to us and that's something that we could use moving forward with someone else, but we can figure that out. Yeah, Debbie, you raised your hand a bunch of times.
I'm just thinking, so now are we talking about paying him for legal work himself? I mean, we don't need him. We didn't need him to give us a boilerplate contract. We have a lawyer. We're paying lawyer fees for that kind of stuff. Wait a minute, for that kind of stuff. And the other thing is, I think you and I talked about this today, when Dr. Effiam came, she spent several times explaining what she was going to do and how she was going to do it and blah, 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 blah. She never charged us for any of that. When the contract was written and accepted and signed, that's when we started paying her. So I think this business of paying him in good faith, I'm really struggling with that. In good faith for what?
Well,
I
okay.
kind of
So
feel this
Natalie, the document that's 6 pages long that came from Logan Consulting that you sent me earlier, has that been shared with everybody or not?
No.
Okay.
So
No, go ahead.
I think it was
the reason I'm asking, because I wasn't necessarily asking you to explain this unless you want to, but in terms of answering Debbie's question, it's my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, that this 6-page document from Logan Consulting that has, headings like situational summary, objectives, measuring success, methodology and program, timing and conditions, etc., that came as a result of discussing things with Natalie and you.
That came as a direct request from the board.
Okay. And
the board directly requested that he make a contract for us. So then we spent a month going back and forth, he, JC, and I, and he put that contract together. He emailed it to me. I sent it to Brian. Brian said, send it to Charlie so he can take a peek at it. And then we got an email back that said, no, this needs to be a legal contract. So we didn't send it to anybody else because at that point, Charles went ahead and made the legal contract that we've been dealing with now for the past couple of months.
Right. So, I mean, I just want to clarify, because I think this is important, that obviously we need to have a legal agreement with anyone that we're contracting for work. So that is what ultimately Charles put together. And then there have been ongoing negotiations about the verbiage and, details of that. But this document, even though at the bottom, it was originally hoping to be signed by the Ridgeville Park District and signed by the consultant and, was to be at that point in time a legal document. It is not, a worthless document. It's not as simple as, oh no, scrap this entirely and use Charlie's instead. Charlie's is the legal document that we will use to be in an official agreement with Dr. Logan should we continue with him. Whereas this is more, we can pick this back up, the Ready Committee, and use this to help guide the actual equity work, which again, that's what the $10,000 is budgeted for, is for equity work, not legal costs, not, paying somebody who would normally sort of make a pitch to us and a proposal to us and try to get the job, and then we hire them and then we pay them hourly. So, I just want to be clear that this document helps answer the question, Debbie, as to what work has been done. It's not as simple as no work was done and we're being charged for 10.25 hours of work. I think the truth lies in the middle there somewhere about work having been done that, as Matt said, we asked him to do as a board, number one. Number two, we did approve hiring him. We just still haven't reached the point of having a signed agreement about that, the details of that hiring. So,
Okay, I'd like to say that, to me, if you don't have a contract, you're not hired. We don't have a contract with him. The other thing is, how are we going to explain to our constituents, well, we paid this money because he wrote up this contract that we're going to use? That's not what that money's for. And
right. Well, I mean, I think the one thing that we've learned in our, quest towards equity work at Ridgeville so far is that specifics are good. Getting very specific about what work we want to do and why, and making sure that we're all on the same page and working hand in hand with our consultant in the ways that we intend to, so that at the end of a year of work, we can look back and say, we did what we said we were going to do. I mean, those are all important, fair things to try to achieve. So, again, to me, there's a bit of gray area, to be fair, as to what constitutes just 3, 4, 5 people coming in and having interviews and they're all on equal ground. And maybe we decide to do a second interview with somebody, or decide to, have our ready meetings and talk about who we like the best. And then that's a step. And then talking about it as a board, that's a step. And the board wasn't ready to even vote on approving the recommendation from the Ready Committee because they felt like they didn't have enough information. So please correct me if I'm wrong, but we went back to him at that point and said, this is why we need more from you for the entirety of the board to feel comfortable hiring you. And that's how we arrived at the 6-page document from Logan Consulting. And, again, like, even if we don't hire him officially, if we decide not to move forward and work with him, I would feel very unfair paying him nothing, given the way everything has gone so far.
So we're going to pay him for him to pitch himself to us. So every person who interviewed, if they send us a bill, guess we're going to pay him. I don't agree, and I won't vote.
Well, the part of his bill that says he's charging us for the interview, that's one of many line items that I'm not okay with. I think I've been pretty clear about what I am okay paying him for, which is the work that he did back and forth with Natalie and JC, and whether we call that 2, 3, 4 hours, and that's it. So no contribution to legal expenses and no paying for things like interviews or obscure alleged document analysis. I don't know what that means, and I agree that in a perfect world, we would not be incurring any expenses from him of any kind prior to having a signed contract. But we're not in a perfect world here. We can cite numerous things that didn't go the way they were supposed to go, and we're going to learn from it. It's going to be fine in the long run.
Learn from it, but I think the minute we pay him, we're opening up a can of worms and we're in trouble. And I don't think that, what are we afraid of? It seems like we're afraid if we don't pay him, or if we don't, do this in a way where nobody gets upset. Are we afraid of backlash from him in the community?
Is anyone afraid? If you're afraid, please raise your hand.
Well, there have been comments made about it.
I'm not afraid. I'm trying to be respectful and professional. And I believe that we have asked Dr. Logan to do work for us, and he has done some work. I'd like to
And I
pay him
think
for
the work he's done has been pitching himself for the job. And that's the cost of doing business.
Okay,
So,
I think we shouldn't go in circles too much. So yeah,
Right.
Matt Rogers.
Let me please jump back in here. I haven't spoken for a little bit. So the 6-page document that you've referenced, that was created before we asked Charles to create a contract for us. Is that correct?
Yes, we didn't ask Charles to create a contract. I think that was Brian that asked Charles to look at it. And
Someone on Ridgeville asked Charles, regardless whether it was a board member or a staff member.
yeah, so you're
create a
correct about the timeline that Dr. Logan's 6-page document predates the
Right.
contract from Charlie.
Right. So when we approved a negotiation of a contract in November, was that 6-page document already in place?
Yes.
Well, when you say in place, what do you mean?
I mean, was it already drafted? That 6-page document was written up, and Natalie just said yes is the answer. Is that correct?
Yes.
Well, yes, may be the answer in terms of its creation, but Natalie, correct me if I'm wrong. That's why I asked if this was shared with everybody. This was actually never officially part of the record of moving forward with him in work, because when this document was created and then shared with Brian and then shared with Charlie, it was at that point in time all but kind of disregarded, because at least from a legal perspective.
If you let me get to my point here, that is why. And I was willing to go along with allowing him to bill 2 hours of his time back to us. That would not be for equity work, but would actually be for the creation of that 6-page document. That's what in my mind, when I said that's what I was willing to do, that's what I was paying for, was that 6-page document with that 2 hours worth of time. Everything beyond that becomes a moot point to me. I mean, we say specifically in the contract itself, item 5G says the consultant shall be responsible for all its expenses arising in connection with this agreement. All legal costs are off the table by the terms of our own contract. I mean, unless I'm misinterpreting that, but that's a pretty straightforward comment. You know, and looking at the other descriptors that he is providing for us, and seeing things like meeting with his attorney. I'm not comfortable paying a consultant to meet with his attorney, because not only am I paying $150 for him, but I'm paying $350 an hour for his attorney. That's costing us $500 an hour every time the two of them meet together and get together. That's a problem for me. He has 4 hours listed for emails, research, discussion, proposal drafts, meetings, and interview. To me, I read that as being the prep work that he was doing and the time that he actually was meeting in the interview process. I'm not good with paying that. I ask about the 1.5 hours for the November and December meetings. If I had seen that he was actually strategizing and planning how we're going to move forward, but staff has told me in this meeting, they were discussing the contract. So it seems like almost everything on here is a discussion of the contract or him prepping to get the job. The only other thing beyond that is the attorney fees, which we specifically state in the agreement is his responsibility. That's why I'm stuck with this 2 hours, and that's as far as I'm willing to go on this.
Well, thank you for that, because that is a very nice breakdown of what we're being asked to pay, and then assessing whether we're okay with each of those items, and if not, why. And that's why I'm not okay with, let's just split the difference, or let's, pick a number. I want to have a more specific reasoning for why we're paying what we're paying and why we're not paying what we're not paying. And to your point, Debbie, about setting a precedent for what could happen in the future, if we have a very specific reason for why we are paying X dollars, then nobody could come in here and say, oh, I'm just making something up and I want you to pay. We're paying him for work that we agreed to. But any work that we did not agree to, we should not be paying for. And anything legal, period, end of story, we should not be paying for.
Okay, I just want to say that I was looking up the 6-page document that was distributed in the November board meeting citizen packet.
Okay.
And basically Illinois law says nobody can obligate the park district to spend monies that hasn't been expressly approved in advance by the board. He never expressly had that approved.
Yeah, well, I don't think the 6-page document was.
Not the this was a 6-page thing. It was the December citizen packet in Charles's document regarding the hiring employees, the one that you sent us, Charles?
Yeah.
Law, let's see, code section 4.6.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've individually, and collectively established quite well that we never agreed to pay for these things that are on a bill that's being given to us. And because we're not in a contract with him yet, even though we knew what his hourly rate was, so I don't really think, I don't think anyone here, correct me if I'm wrong, feels that we have to pay these or that we're somehow doing the wrong thing by not paying them. I think it's more about which charges do we all agree to.
But we're talking about law here, Martha. The law says.
So we got an invoice. We have a decision whether to pay the invoice.
Right.
It seems to me that all 5 of us don't think that we should pay the invoice in full, right?
I think that's a very fair assessment. I don't think there's anybody here who wants to pay $2,640.
That's for sure.
Yeah. So Matt and Debbie are at 2 hours, $300. I'm the highest on record at $1,487.50.
Mick, what about Mick?
And then let me just throw in a third option would be kind of following Charles's lead is asking for a specific breakdown. And then, but going forward, I would like to make a counter offer back to Logan Consulting, and then whether or not we're going to move forward with Logan Consulting.
I have a question, a legal question. If we pay him, does that say that we're in a contract with him?
Not necessarily.
But could that be a problem?
No, it would not be a problem.
Okay.
I mean,
I have a question about that too for
Wait, I
Brian.
want to hear the rest of what Charlie had to say on that.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Charlie.
no, I mean, look, if I don't know what the board's deciding. I hear what everybody's saying. I think at this point, it may not even be up to the board whether they want to move forward with Dr. Logan. Dr. Logan, I'm sure, is hearing everything you're saying right now, and he may be deciding he doesn't want to move forward with you. But he's hearing what you've said about his bill, and even if he isn't hearing it now, he'll get that information because it's public record. And I think at this point there's really nothing further to discuss because you're not going to vote to agree to something now because you don't know what you can negotiate with them. Everybody seems to be okay with Commissioner Mitchell speaking to Dr. Logan and reporting back. I think maybe that's what needs to happen now. And
I'd like to bring him a counteroffer. And it seems to me that we do have consensus that we don't agree to the 2640.
Well, I think he's going to know that, and I think it's appropriate to go back to him and say, look, and we don't agree, and this is why.
Yeah.
Now, what are your thoughts about this? And I know Mick wanted to say something.
Yeah.
I mean, Commissioner Morrell.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I kind of obviously on the subject, but a little different. I think it's important that hopefully the Ready committee can meet on this, or you can have a meeting soon. Is that possible? Just to get the opinions of that board and see where they want to go, right? Because Dr. Logan he's not working with us. he's working with the Ready Committee, and they came to us. We okayed them budgeting $10,000. They have this $10,000 to spend and move forward with a consultant who's going to be working with them much more directly than he is with us. So while I think it's important for us to figure out this contract and these terms and this money, if the Ready Committee decides they don't want to use Logan Consulting anymore, then none of this matters anymore. Obviously, yes, we still have to decide whether, and I do agree with the fact that, yes, maybe we pay him something, we ensure that that's not entering into a contract. If we have to have him sign something, he understands this is a contract, it's just payment for work that we asked him to do. That's legal stuff that I'm sure will be taken care of. But the most important part is I think the Ready Committee needs to meet and decide what they want to do.
So just so you know, we do have a meeting scheduled for next Thursday. We have an agenda out and everything already. So I will amend the agenda and I will add this on there.
Yeah, and Mick, as a fellow board member and as a member of the Ready Committee, I really appreciate you coming up with that idea, because one of the things that I cited as justification for being as surprised as I was with this bill is, again, the equity budget is supposed to be spent on equity work, and the Ready Committee exists for the purpose of, executing some of that work. As you say, Dr. Logan, if hired, would be working almost exclusively with the Ready Committee, to some extent with the board and staff, but definitely in large part with the Ready Committee. And so one of my, pieces of evidence I would submit for why I would argue no equity work has been done in the context of spending, possibly spending as much as 10.25 times his hourly rate, is that the Ready Committee has not been involved in any of this. We've been suspending our meetings week after week after week, or I should say, we're on a every 2 week meeting schedule. So we haven't met in ages, and it's because we're trying to be efficient and meet once we have a consultant who's been hired, and we've been on hold with that for quite a while. So I think it's absolutely something at this point, because of what's happened, because of how long this has been drawn out and everything that's happened therein, I think it's absolutely appropriate to kick it back to the committee, talk it over there, and see what the consensus is there. It might even make sense to go with that, especially since that's already on the calendar for next Thursday, before we, task Matt Mitchell with the job of talking to Dr. Logan, because, we don't know where we're trying to stand with Dr. Logan until the Ready Committee has a chance to weigh in on it. I don't really think that this is appropriate to kind of treat it like it's an auction, like who's got the highest offer for Dr. Logan, who's got the lowest offer. I mean, he didn't submit a bill expecting us to come back with a negotiation. That's, he's got an hourly rate. He communicated that from the get-go. There is work that we asked him to do, which he did, but then there's a whole lot of work that he's claiming he did, which, whoa, we never said yes to that. Like, why is that coming to us before we've even contracted with you? And so, if we make a payment to him for what we think we owe him, and I agree with what Mick said, which is that we should be very clear in doing so, that we are not submitting payment as part of an agreement of hiring him, but rather paying him for work that was done, and that's maybe the end of the agreement, if that's where we end up. But anyway, yes, I just very much agree with Mick's suggestion that we take it back to the Ready Committee, and then we go from there. And Matt Rogers, as to your motion for tonight, it sounds like we might need to, my desk is falling apart. I'm sorry, I'm moving my screen around so much. It sounds like we might need to just officially vote no on his invoice.
I have no motion outstanding.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's right. You
So
took
I
it
just
off of the
removed it.
bills
I just
being
removed
approved.
it from the bills.
Right.
So I would suggest that you don't vote no on it, that you vote to hold it till next month and ask for a detail of time that is sufficient for you to determine what was done, when it was done, and what work was performed and what it related to.
Well, we could,
And
we
I'm-
could ask, sorry, go ahead.
I'm not trying to be funny here. Is that going to make this bill higher by us asking him to do that? Is he going to then add more time to this?
I
And now
mean,
we're taking more time from the Ready Committee? Like where does this end?
I can't tell you what he's going to do. He could
Right.
decide he's going to bill you for listening to this whole mishmash on the internet. I don't know.
Yeah.
But, I seem to hear, and it makes sense to me, that you're not going to pay him for stuff that doesn't relate to the service that he was supposed to perform.
I hate to table this and move this all to next month because I think we've had some good discussion here, and I think we're headed in the right direction. But I still think the most important is to get clarification from the Ready Committee on where they want to go.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's just too many issues given the bill that we received, given the contract clause that still, has yet to be worked out entirely. So, given that the Ready Committee is going to meet in 2 weeks and then certainly be ready to kind of relay back to us at our next board meeting what's going on. But it sounds like Charles and I'm sorry, Matt Rogers, was it you? I forget who brought up the idea of asking for more detail from Dr. Logan about his existing bill. I don't know, like where are we feeling about that step? Is that something we should do or should we wait on that?
I think it's a good step.
I would certainly love more detail because when I look at the line items, it's just not clear to me exactly what some of those things mean and exactly how they differ from each other. There's certainly some overlap. It seems like, as Matt Rogers said, he might be charging us for his time in conjunction with his lawyer's time for at least some hours, such that we're paying a Logan consulting fee and his lawyer fee at the same time for the same hour. I mean, it's just, it gets kind of hard to even keep track of. Brian, I saw you turned your camera on. Did you want to weigh in?
Whatever you decide in the next few minutes, I think Matt Mitchell has offered, and you should accept, Dr. Logan should be notified, where we sit and not to spend any more time until you hear from us. That would be my suggestion. Because if you're going to go to the Ready Committee, that's in a week, and then you're going to go to the next board meeting, that's another 30 days, and we don't want to have any problems more than we already have.
Right. I agree with that. And I just think not to, insinuate or imply that anyone here has done anything wrong, but there's been some confusing communication and it has mounted to, feeling insurmountable at this point. And so when Matt is communicating with Dr. Logan, and hopefully there won't be a lot of back and forth, I think, like you said, Brian, just one communication that relays all of that stuff. Like I requested already, if you can copy me, Matt, and also copy Brian, and that way we can all just kind of be on the same page. Not all, because with the Open Meetings Act, we can't copy everybody. And meanwhile, the Ready Committee will talk and we'll, get back to this next month. I mean, I don't think any of us like that we're dragging it into another month, but I don't see another way. This is not resolvable at this point in time.
Right.
Do we want to?
Can I just
Go ahead,
clarify?
Matt. Sorry.
I guess let's finish and I'll do a recap. I just want to make sure I have clear marching orders.
I was just going to add that while we don't maybe not have clear direction on what or how much we'd be willing to pay, maybe what we can say is come to an agreement on what we're not going to pay, on what fees we wouldn't be willing to pay. And that way, Matt can bring that to Dr. Logan. And before Dr. Logan spends more time, whether it be giving us further detail or moving that, maybe he can then come to a decision. Is this something he wants to move forward with at that point? So maybe, just in fairness to him, and in fairness to us, in fairness to the Ready Committee before their next meeting, maybe that would be something we can bring to him and we can give him, a little bit more of a clear picture on what the board and what Ridgeville is comfortable with moving forward And if that's within his comfort as well, then maybe this is something that we can still work out.
I guess I'm curious, Mick, if you mean that we would tell him at this point in time, given what bill we've seen, that what we're not paying and what we are paying, or that we'd ask for more clarification first and then make that call to him.
Yeah, but like, I don't think we need clarification on like lawyer fees, right? Like we've all decided we're not going to pay the lawyer fees. So we can come out front and say, like, he could, like, rather than him breaking down what his lawyer did for hour by hour.
Right. It's moot if we're not
That
paying.
doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We're not paying for your lawyer fees. I don't care what he did. Right. So if we can tell him that, then some of the points of clarification may not even matter.
Right.
Well,
Okay.
I just want to add that if we're going to be discussing this in the future, at that point, it should be a closed meeting. I think the information is out there that Commissioner Mitchell has that will allow him to have discussions with Dr. Logan. And then if he'll have useful information to bring back to the board, I think that should be at a closed meeting.
I agree.
Charlie, I'm just curious why. Like, I'm not questioning you.
Well, let me put it to this way. If you were going to buy a used car and you said to Brian, we'll pay up to $5,000, get us the best deal you can, the used car dealer could have access to the minutes and know that you'll pay up to $5,000. So he's going to ask for $5,000. When you're discussing contract issues, you want to have your discussions amongst yourselves so you know what your position is. And you can go back to the other person and discuss it without him knowing what you've already decided.
Thank you, Charles. Makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. Thank you for explaining it further. Okay, so Matt, did you want to do some sort of a final summary as to where you're kind of feeling like we are so that we can all nod and say yes and kind of then you speak to Dr. Logan?
Sure. Can I circle back to Mick's last comment? How does the board feel about expressing to Logan Consulting, we don't intend to pay legal teams, his legal fees, his time for interviewing, or his time for preparation for interviewing?
I fully support that, not just because of everything said previously, but I also really agree with Brian's stance that we should really communicate with Dr. Logan as soon as possible and as much as possible. So,
sure.
if
I'll reach out to him tomorrow morning. I just want to make sure that, the five of us are on the same page.
Right. Well, and I think category by category, in other words, legal, we're not paying. But when it comes to what hours he spent, we can possibly, try to get more clarification as to exactly how those hours were spent so that we can then decide.
We need more clarification for sure. That's what we're asking for.
Right, but not more clarification on the legal fees, because we can just communicate, like you said, that we're not paying that. And then, sorry, the other two that you said, we're not
interviewing
paying
and preparing to interview.
And
what was it? The interview and what else?
Preparing to interview.
Right.
Or preparing to make a proposal.
Right. Yeah, research, whatever else, kind of in that category. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm hearing that we all.
I wouldn't say we all, but I would say the majority, because I don't think that's necessarily the best approach, because then we go back and say, oh, but we aren't going to pay this as well. Oh, but we aren't going to pay this as well. And it just feels unfair to kind of say, oh, well, we aren't going to pay this. Oh, well, we aren't going to pay this one either. Next week, oh, well, we aren't going to pay this one either.
Oh, we might pay that, but we're not going to, yeah.
Well, we're asking for clarification, right? Clarification.
I think it's as simple as saying we will not pay legal fees. Could you please clarify the rest of your hours?
Perfect.
I think that's the best way to approach it, because we all are in agreement that legal fees will not be paid. And it really, it sort of becomes what of that other group, once he itemizes that in detail, what of that are we willing to do? But if we start saying, well, we aren't going to do this, we aren't going to pay, oh, you shared this, but we aren't going to pay that now either.
Right. So I agree to Matt's clarification. Everybody else?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Okay.
Sure,
So I
that'll
will reach out to him tomorrow, ask for a more detailed explanation of the hours spent, and say that the board is not willing to pay his legal fees. Anything else regarding the invoice? Also, number 3 is please don't do any more work going forward until you hear from us.
Right, and how are we communicating, if at all, about the contract itself, or are
So
we kind of,
I'm not there yet.
okay,
But
so you just wanted to work on the invoice, and once you're clear, Matt, on exactly what you're telling him regarding the invoice, you're moving to the other.
So, yeah, well, right now I just want to have a clarity among the 5 of us regarding the invoice. And what I'm asking for is more detailed clarification of the hours spent. The board is not intending to pay any legal fees. And we're asking him not to do any more substantive work until we ask for it. Everybody agree to that?
Yep.
Okay. Then the Ready Committee is meeting next week, next Thursday. As the board, are we asking the Ready Committee to clarify whether they want to continue moving forward with Dr. Logan?
To make a
Yeah,
recommendation?
yes.
To make a recommendation?
Well,
Yes.
yeah, I mean, because it still has to come back to the board.
Sure.
I think that could be reported to you and Martha. You're the one heading this up. I don't know, if they can, or maybe to Natalie, right? Because then Natalie or Brian can then let the rest of us know.
So then, assuming the Ready Committee wants to move forward and Dr. Logan wants to move forward, does the board want to move forward?
For me, it'll depend on his answers to the invoice.
Yeah,
and
I think so too. And
this is-
I think that Charlie's completely right, that if Dr. Logan listens to what we said here tonight, he could very well not want to move forward with us. But like you say, Matt, if he, or whoever said this, if he wants to move forward with us and we want to move forward with him, which I think we're all in agreement that will partially come from hearing from the Ready Committee as to them being updated about everything that's happened so far and seeing if they're, comfortable moving forward. Yeah, I mean, I agree, Debbie, that it's sort of like, some of this is hard to answer at this point in time. If it boiled down to the simple clause in the contract and us all saying, yes, we'd be moving forward. But we have a huge thing in front of us tonight, which is this invoice that we have huge issue with. So, I mean, I'm just unfortunately not, feeling like
Sure.
it's going to be all that well received that we're telling.
Well, I
him
don't
to-
think so either. I think we're going down the road of not working with Dr. Logan. That's just my gut. I'd love to salvage it, but it seems to me that we're kind of getting to irreconcilable differences. So
how about if you do that tomorrow and let's see where we are. This is starting to go in, I feel.
Yeah, I think at this point, Matt,
So
unless you need further clarification,
we have two
or you
things.
want to, yeah.
2 things. 1, I'm reaching out to Dr. Logan about the invoice. 2, the Ready Committee is meeting next Thursday and
Great.
giving a recommendation on whether they want to move forward with Logan Consulting. Those are the 2 things that I think we've agreed on. The third is a clarification from him, whether he wants to continue moving forward. And I think that's as far as I've gotten.
I have
If
something.
he doesn't, then we don't need to waste any more time on it.
True. I mean, I think there are enough people who want to salvage the contract and moving forward with Dr. Logan here tonight that should be our goal. That being said, if he, all it takes is one party, him or us, that doesn't want to continue and it will not continue. I think unfortunately we have to bring up the legal cost issue one more time. Because at some point, and it must have been 2 meetings ago, I wasn't able to attend last month. So 2 meetings ago, there was talk of legal costs being covered or not covered. I don't know if it took place in the meeting or if that was not in the meeting itself. But Brian, if you could just clarify for us if there was any communication with Dr. Logan about any coverage from us for his legal fees, if that was anything that was agreed to,
Yeah.
you know, before this point.
Yeah, we, Natalie and I, and Natalie just reminded me that when we met with Dr. Logan, we had these, you know, bill back hours, so to speak, in our back pocket. And we said, he asked if his lawyer could look at the contract. And I said, basically, it's a boilerplate basic contract that should not take your lawyer very much time. Sharpen your pencil and get it done. And assuming that we meant that I had these hours to pay for a little legal time, but not drawn out weeks and months.
So it sounds like it was very vague, but that there was some communication about, sure, go ahead, have your lawyer look at it, but it shouldn't take much and we will
Right.
cover some of that.
Right. Natalie, can you
Yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong? I think that's the way that conversation went.
I don't remember what conversations were had specifically in open meetings, so I don't know if there's like, we can watch back the tapes and like see exactly what was said, but there was conversation had between board members and Brian and myself about covering the legal fee for his attorney to look at the contract. And that was approved. There was confusion about the message of what that meant. There were some folks wanted a specific dollar amount. Some people wanted a specific hour amount, 1 to 2 hours of billable time, up to like $300 to $500 of billable time. But it was agreed that we could tell him that his lawyer could look at the contract. It then spiraled wildly out of control because now we've gone months and months now of back and forth between attorneys. But we did agree, and we did tell him in a meeting that his lawyer could look at the contract and we would pay for that.
Okay, because that may have been what was said, but that was never the intention that I put forward in my discussions, because what I was willing to cover off on was the time that had been spent between you and JC and Dr. Logan. That was his time, not the attorney's time, because I would never agree to pay for an attorney for someone else, because if you go out and find a $600, $700 an hour attorney versus $150 an hour attorney, I have no control over that. Yeah. And that's what creates a great problem in saying, oh yes, we'll pay for your attorney.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think we need more clarification on that. I will go back and listen to the November meeting about what was said during the meeting.
Well, I can tell you that there was nothing said during the meeting. Debbie actually watched it today, so she can speak a little more clearly to it. Okay. But the intent during that meeting was to never, ever discuss, we will pay you for something other than the equity work. And so those conversations were had previous to the meeting and never discussed in a meeting. And so those were one-on-one discussions between board members.
And how do we justify anyway paying from the budget for anything other than the equity work?
I believe the conversation stemmed from the fact that we had asked Dr. Logan for a contract, and then he spent time putting the contract together. And then we said, actually, no, we're not going to use that contract. Our lawyer's going to drop a contract. And his response was, well, that will require for me then to hire a lawyer to look over the contract because it's legalese that I don't necessarily understand. That's where the whole thing came from. And again, I don't remember if it was ever specifically spoken about in a board meeting, either the November or the December meeting publicly, but there was conversations had about that issue coming up. And the understanding that I had, and I know Brian had from the conversations that we had, was that we could tell him, yes, your attorney can look at it and we'll pay for that time. It wasn't. Yeah.
What if his attorney charged $1,000 now? We're going to pay for that time? I would have never agreed to that.
Well,
I
that's
mean,
where
I'm not making this up. Does nobody
no,
else remember having these conversations?
I agree with Natalie that it was a concession, and that's where the 2 hours came from. Right, that's where the 2 hour
Of attorney time.
And that he could bill us
That he
his
could bill us through.
billable hours, Logan's, which is $150 an hour for a couple of hours.
Yeah. So that's clearly a source of misunderstanding amongst us.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that there was definitely, I think, more broad understanding of an intention to pay him for his time than there was broad understanding of any legal fees, and that's why covering of any legal fees, and that's why I was trying to get clarification from multiple sources today as to whether we ever technically agreed to that or not. If we agreed to it prior to him spending that legal money, and then he's saying, wait a second, I wouldn't have spent this if you didn't say you were covering it, that's a problem. You know, that's not fair. But I know there are many of us who never feel that we're in a position to be agreeing to cover any legal fees. And also, it never would have been an official agreement if we didn't know what the cost was going to be, because legal costs can vary wildly. And if we didn't specify an hourly rate we were okay with, or a time of legal time spent, or some sort of just total that we would cover, then that wasn't official. But I remember that on very short notice before the meeting 2 months ago, we received, a pretty strongly worded email from Dr. Logan saying that if there were legal costs, that he would be sending us the bill or something like that. That doesn't mean that we agreed to it, but if subsequent conversations with him, with Brian or whomever, made it seem like we would be covering some of that, then I'm leaning more towards Matt Mitchell's, suggestion that we make a contribution to the legal costs, as well as paying him for some of his time. Not necessarily, for the record, I just want to make it clear, I'm not necessarily agreeing with 1,400 whatever, but perhaps something else. And I think that we really have to move on in the form of getting clarification on the line items from Dr. Logan. We need to make sure that he is not spending any subsequent time from his hourly perspective, nor from his lawyer. I mean, nothing else from his lawyer moving forward will be covered by us. And it's still to be decided what heretofore will be covered. JC, were you gonna say something?
Yes, I found the string of emails where this was mentioned. It's from November 9th, where Dr. Logan essentially says, if the Park District's lawyer is going to put together a contract, that he will need to run it by his attorney for approval. At which point Natalie responds, have your lawyer take a look at it. I've got the written emails pulled up here. If you guys, Natalie and Brian are both, and Dr. Logan myself, we're all on these emails. And so, I mean, it's in writing. There is no specific amount. And the way it reads to me is essentially exactly what Natalie said. Like, of course, have your lawyer take a look at it, which is,
But there's a difference between have your attorney look at it and have your attorney look at it, we're going to pay for it. That's a very different.
Well, and in Dr. Logan's email, it says that he is going to bill the Park District for it. Natalie doesn't agree to pay for it. She just says to go ahead and have his lawyer look at it. I'm just reiterating the emails that I have. I can forward these to whoever wants them. I just wanted to let you all know I've got them pulled up right now.
Okay, well, I mean, Matt Rogers makes an excellent point. I mean, if there was communication, which there was, that he felt his lawyer would have to get involved, and there was communication back. Sure, go ahead and do that. That's maybe where we're heading, is that lawyers are getting involved. That in and of itself certainly does not you know, indisputably imply that we're making any coverage. But I'm just, it's important to me that if any specific promise was made to cover any specific amount of legal cost, that we don't change the tune of what we talked about. And that's why, you know, I talked to Matt Mitchell earlier about somebody could maybe volunteer to take over the communication from here on out and really make sure that things are clear moving forward, because things have gotten very muddy. And you know, I still don't feel like I'm clear. I don't know about the rest of you about what may or may not have been promised to Dr. Logan about covering legal fees. So if he had an, you know, if he wanted them covered, that doesn't mean we agreed to it. But if we did agree to it, then that's what we should stick with. So I think Matt Mitchell, in terms of moving forward with your communication with Dr. Logan, I mean, I would recommend that you get very clear as possible between Natalie, Brian, and anyone else who may have had direct communication with Dr. Logan about the legal, you know, so Charlie maybe too. And it's got to, we've got to get our ducks in a row here before we communicate back to him. I think that's a minimum.
I agree. Here's my updated communication is we're uncomfortable regarding the legal fees as part of the invoice. We'd like a clarification of the hours. We'd like a clarification of any understanding that he had that we would pay his legal fees. We will not pay any legal fees moving forward. We would like him not to do any more billable work or incur any other legal fees that he plans on billing us for moving forward. Is that fair?
Do you mind putting that in writing, Matt, just so that we can kind of give an official, like, I don't know if you could drop it in the chat. It sounded like you had put it in writing already.
I have, yeah. I'll do it. I'll put it in the chat.
Do you have to send that to Natalie or me first?
No, I can do it to everyone.
No, I mean, well, we're in a meeting, so you're just going to summarize what.
Yeah, this is just
Yeah.
what I said.
It's going to be in the minutes in any event.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is all open hand right now.
And I think Commissioner Gaines just wants to be able to see it.
Sure. I just put it in the chat as my outline of my communication moving forward.
Yeah, that's all good by me. And yes, if I reach a certain point of hearing words, I've got to see it in writing. So that's totally fine.
Do we want to add that we don't plan to pay for his time that he spent interviewing with us?
Kind of back to the open hand cards here. I prefer not to. I prefer to get a clarification of ours and then we decide what we're
I agree. I think also back to Matt Rogers' point, all at once, a communication as to what we're paying and why, or what we're not paying and why, instead of piecemeal. It just seems more organized. And that way we can have as much clarification as he can possibly offer us as to how the time was spent. And, you know, it was always my understanding and hope and, you know, perhaps assumption that charging hourly would still mean that we understood where the time was to be going, and then we'd get the bill and it wouldn't be a surprise. Whereas this one is very much a surprise. So, you know, we're having to do this retroactively, but just asking for more specifics about how the time was spent, I feel like is perfectly fair. And then I think it's also fair that the decision as to what we pay and what we don't pay would happen after the clarification, not before. So, but yes, Mick, I mean, I'm totally on board with not paying for the interview. That part's already clear to me. I think we just have to kind of get all of the rest of the specifics. Matt, did you want to move on to anything contract related, or are we just gonna like cap it here in terms of communication with him?
Well, so right now we're waiting for a recommendation from the Ready Committee. And after my first conversations, whether Logan Consulting wants to continue with us, right? If either of those things don't happen, then we're done. We're just hashing out this invoice. If everybody is comfortable moving forward, are we ready to sign a contract with him?
Well, I think it's actually a good point, especially because in our open meetings here, we can communicate all as one, whereas we can't until the next meeting. So if in the perhaps unlikely event that he is fine to move forward with us, given your communication you're about to make to him, as you put in writing here, also, you know, pending his submission to us of more detail of how those hours were spent, you know, if we can get as far as resolving all of that and all parties are okay, I think it would be nice to at least have you prepared, Matt, to communicate that final, hopefully final contract negotiation such that we could actually achieve a signed contract as a result. Again, I think it's unlikely we're going to get that far, but given that it's my intention and I know some others' intention of resolving this if possible, you know, we probably should talk about that real quick. And I'll go first. I'm fine with putting in the clause that he wants to. If we want at this point to hear from Charlie, we could do that too.
I mean, I don't think any of us don't want to move forward with him. I don't think we would be putting this much effort into it and this much time into it if that weren't what we all wanted, you know, deep down. But again, it depends on the Ready Committee. But yeah, hearing from Charlie is always great in his courtroom.
So then I think if we can try to keep this brief, I sent each of you an email yesterday. I spoke with Charles yesterday regarding, from what I heard from Charlie yesterday, was the hang up regarding kind of an exculpatory clause. I laid out my thoughts. I'm comfortable with it. I think it's a very low risk clause. I think we're covered by insurance. He's covered by insurance. I just can't imagine a scenario where we would rely on him to the point where we would bring suit against him. I think anything for something that we did, not that he did, that we did. So that's why I'm comfortable with the clause. And if that is the last hang up in the contract, I'm willing to include that. And from my conversation with Charles, is he's not recommending that. So I think, Charles, after I spoke to folks yesterday, they wanted to hear your thoughts about it.
So without regard to the clause, his clause is not well drafted, but beyond that, it's an exculpatory clause, meaning that if he does anything wrong, he's getting your agreement now that you can't bring a lawsuit against him. That's kind of, there are agreements where that's appropriate. In an agreement like this, it's not appropriate. He shouldn't be doing that. You have a right to expect him to perform under the contract. And if he fails to perform, you have a right to sue him if he causes an injury because of his negligence or some other reason that would give liability. That's my thought. You're right in looking at this, that it's hard to imagine what kind of liability he could really cause you. And it might not even be that much where it'd be even worth filing a lawsuit if he did do something. But in my mind, typically, you look to the party who's got a duty, who can protect that based on that duty by getting insurance or something else to perform that duty the way they're supposed to. And they shouldn't be able to rely on a clause in the contract that says they don't need to perform that duty appropriately. And if they cause you injury, too bad, tough luck. That's inappropriate. Now, there are contracts where it can be appropriate. And typically those are high-risk situations where it's very difficult to insure against the risk by one side or the other. And you can look at those, but this isn't that type of situation. So to me, I find it offensive that somebody's going to provide you services would going into things saying, look, if I don't provide the services wrong, I don't have any liability to you. But if you're going to agree to that, then I'm going to ask for an exculpatory clause in my contract with the board. So if I do something wrong, you can't sue me. I'm not going to ask for that because it'd be inappropriate legally for an attorney to do that. but that's my feeling on the exculpatory clause. So I can't recommend it. If you guys want to do it, it's very low risk. But that's the situation in my mind.
You know, I was all for saying, because my feeling is that he can't really do anything. He has to bring it to the Ready Committee. The Ready Committee has to bring it to the board. And if we agree to do it, then it's on us.
But if he
But I'm
advises you,
listening to you now, and I'm feeling a little bit differently given everything that's going on. So I'm not sure how I feel about that, Matt. Don't count me in yet. Not after hearing Charlie and what's going on with the bill and the this and the that.
Sure. Can I just counter with the language of the clause supplied by his attorney? The parties acknowledge and agree that consultant shall not be liable or responsible for business decisions, actions, or lack thereof, or determinations by the Park District or any of its representatives, whether in connection with the services or otherwise, and the Park District bears sole risk and liability for its business and all determinations and actions or lack thereof with respect thereto. How I read that is that we're responsible for our actions. Even if we rely on him to make a decision, we rely on him, but we make the decision, it's on us. This does not cover an intentional bad act on his part.
well,
Right?
well, no, it does cover an intentional bad act. He can intentionally give you bad advice that causes liability.
Sure, no, I'm saying more an independent bad act where he hurts somebody and he's going to say, oh, I can't be responsible.
Well, you know, I don't know about that. I mean, if we have people on our premises and he's on our premises and he hurts somebody on our premises, and we get sued because we allowed him on the premises, and we allowed a situation that allowed him to hurt somebody. And again, I think this is extremely low risk, and I don't really envision that happening. But if it did happen, why shouldn't we be able to sue against him for indemnification of any injury that we have to pay out to somebody else? I mean, it is low risk. I agree.
Yeah, I just
But-
don't read. I don't read the contract. I don't read that clause like that.
Well, I did say that clause is not well drafted.
Yes.
So, I mean, it's kind of hard to even understand what he's trying to protect against there.
How I read it is we do something, we get sued for it, we try to cross-claim him and say we relied on his professional judgment in making this decision so that you're responsible and we're not.
Okay, I mean,
I think I have two questions. I mean, I guess one is more of a statement. I think, we have to be careful how much time we spend talking about super unlikely events. There's a lot of common sense involved in terms of us choosing to listen to advice that's given to us, yes or no. We are already in a position of being relatively intelligent individuals and, knowing whether something sounds like it's right or not. And guess what? If we're unclear as to whether something Dr. Logan or anyone else advises us to do, guess who we're going to talk to about it right away? Charlie. Okay. So Charlie is already in a position to help make sure that we don't do something discriminatory or that we don't do something, whatever, harmful in any way. And so there's all these layers that exist to make sure that we do the right thing. Common sense being one of them, having a lawyer being another one of them. And also I have to say that hiring Dr. Logan in the first place is another common sense move. We're not hiring somebody who's going to execute some individual bad action or whatever it was referred to. And we all know that. Now, I understand that lawyers have to deal with the possibility of XYZ, no matter how unlikely. But we also have to put a cap on this, how down the rabbit hole we go, If you think the clause is poorly worded, such that it's confusing, and or that it's poorly worded such that it's problematic legally, Charlie, perhaps maybe offer a draft back to that. I hesitate to say this because the legal back and forth has got to stop. But if we could just edit the clause so that we feel better about it in those realms, present it back to him in the context of this communication Matt Mitchell is already planning to make. And, you know, there's a piece of this that I'm inherently okay with, which is that as a park district, it's already our responsibility to make the best decisions that we can make, and that we are doing that the best we can, and that we will continue to do so regardless of what Dr. Logan tells us. You know, I mean, as to why he feels the need for it to be in there in the first place, I don't know, but I don't really think it's our job to speculate on that either. Everybody wants to feel protected. Everybody wants to feel like they're not assuming liability that isn't fair to be assuming. So, I don't know. I mean, Debbie, can I ask for clarification from you, Debbie, as to what Charlie said that made you feel differently about this situation?
Yeah, and what you said just actually made me feel really different. You're saying that our protection, and we have safeguards, and one of them is having a lawyer. Our lawyer is saying to us, this is not something I would recommend. I don't think it's the best way to protect yourselves, blah, blah, blah. And now you're saying, well, we should just not get to whatever, we should do it. At this point, after hearing what you said and hearing what Charlie said, I think we need to take Charlie's advice. If he's not comfortable with it, he's our lawyer. This whole thing is getting so, just so messy, in your words, that, you know, he's got his lawyer. We have our lawyer. I think we should listen to him.
So let me just say this, you know, if we knew what his actual issue was, and we could ask him, Commissioner Mitchell could ask him and find out what that was, and we could try to draft appropriate language for that. I suspect that this was language inserted by his attorney. And I'm not sure what the attorney thought she was protecting against when she put it in. The communications with the attorney, they didn't seem to flow all the way back to Dr. Logan. So it's unclear as to exactly what's going on. But, you know, I think there's nothing wrong with Commissioner Mitchell saying, look, we're trying to understand why you think you need this protection. What it is that you're trying to protect against, because he does have insurance. He's not getting any protection if we make a decision that somebody can't sue him. There's nothing we can do that would protect him in that regard. So what does he think is being protected? And if we knew that, we could address that.
That's a good point.
You know, there were things that were expressed to us that they thought they needed protection on. For instance, they said, we're concerned that after a termination, he won't be able to recover fees for work he did beforehand. I didn't agree with that, but I knew exactly what the issue was, and we drafted language and we put it in there so that they didn't have any concerns.
What I'm hearing is it's also kind of unlikely we're going to get to this far down the road. But if we do, if we can agree to language that Charles agrees to, then the board would agree to sign the contract.
I'd have to see the contract before I make that decision.
Yeah, but what we're trying to do is avoid all five of us having to read the contract every time and get involved in it.
I think if Charles can address what is the issue that's at concern for Dr. Logan, what are they trying to protect themselves against? And we can have Charles counter with that protections for them. I'm fine moving ahead with that as it is that way.
It sounds to me like people want to find a way to do the contract with him if it can be done.
Yes.
And it also sounds like people are willing to make concessions that are reasonable in that regard.
Yes.
Yes.
So I'm with, if Charles says, yes, this works, then I'll okay the contract. He's our lawyer. He's not God, but he's our lawyer.
Not even close.
Yeah.
I agree with what you said, Debbie, and I never felt comfortable, as I said to many of you, I never felt comfortable, on the surface, disregarding Charles's advice to us. I mean, you know, we have him for the purpose of advising us, and that's why it was always my goal to better understand why Charlie had a problem with that, you know. And so thank you, Charlie, for answering that question. And you know, many of us are not lawyers, but we can still understand things when they're explained in terms that we understand, and make the best decision that we can make once we have that level of understanding. So, you know, it's always best, obviously, that we can reach a point where we all agree, rather than just accept Dr. Logan's proposed language, even if we have issues with it. So I don't want to go back and forth a million times, but if we can reach that point of having a revision that Charlie feels okay with and Dr. Logan feels okay with, I think what I'm hearing from others is that we're okay giving provisional approval of that and being ready to move forward with that. Again, if we get that far with Dr. Logan
Right.
at all. And I got a thumbs up from Mick. I mean, as everybody else.
Yeah, as long
Yeah.
as Charlie feels okay about it, I'm in.
Okay.
Fair enough.
And Matt Rogers, you already said so, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, I'm clear on that. So I think and I'm not gonna exceed those two things, is start communicating with Dr. Logan about the 4 issues we'd agreed on. We're waiting to hear back from the Ready Committee, whether we want to keep moving forward. If we hear back from the Ready Committee that they do, and Dr. Logan still does, Charles and I will try to hammer out the details, including the heart of this exculpatory clause, and see if we can find common language. Is that fair?
Yes, just technically speaking, Matt, as we all know, you're not our lawyer, so Charlie would be doing that particular communication. right?
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm not acting as a lawyer at all. Charles is our attorney, and
Right,
I'm not dealing with their attorney.
Okay, so you'll be handling the communication and making sure that all of that gets, all of those parties get connected as needed and go over those items. And then Matt, I assume you would be able to update, well, you can't update all of us. You could have,
I can have Natalie or Brian.
right, give us an update that has, well, you know, give us an update, whatever it may be, after you've had.
Sure, I will keep the board updated of.
So maybe the best thing to do is just run the update through me, and then I can convey a privileged communication to the board.
Right.
Right, and thank you, Charlie, because we are trying to lessen what we ask Brian to do here, and Natalie as well. So yes, let's go with that route. Okay, and then Matt, were there any other elements of the communication to Dr. Logan that you needed to go over, or are we set there?
Even finalizing my notes. No, I feel comfortable with what I'm being asked to do.
Okay, and then JC, we're all on track to meet with the Ready Committee next week, and we can do our best to give them, you know, comprehensive but hopefully succinct update as to what's happened. In fact, it might even be wise to communicate that they could watch the recording of this meeting if they find the time to do so, so that when we meet
Spare hours.
well, just this piece, which is obviously the bulk of the meeting this far, if they're able to, you know, then they'll be as informed as possible as to what we went over tonight, at least, and they can ask questions about anything referenced that they don't understand, and we can all kind of talk that through. And meanwhile, Matt is communicating with Dr. Logan, so if we get any updates on that prior to a week from tonight, we can factor that in too. So especially because, you know, we might find that it's moot if he's in a position where he doesn't want to move forward with us. So
I agree.
Absolutely. And do I did the invoice that Dr. Logan sent, that did not make it into the packet of public information? Is that correct?
that's correct.
Am I still allowed to share it with the Ready Committee?
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
a good question. Is that Natalie and Brian and perhaps Charlie, is that something we need to upload to the packet retroactively so that it's referenceable for what we went over tonight?
I think that's a good idea.
Okay, and I previously asked that it be included in the minutes, so can we do that? Alternatively, include it in the packet?
Yeah, so I'm gonna, you can still include it in the minutes, but we don't publish the minutes until they're approved.
True.
So
the
I would
packet
prefer
would-
that we get it online sooner so that somebody can see it if they're interested. You know, we want to be as transparent as we can be, understanding that sometimes things don't happen quite right, but we're making amends for that by putting it on right away.
Okay. So yeah, and I just want to remind everyone, our next meeting is next Thursday, January 20th. We meet at 6:30. I agree, Martha. I think it would be really helpful for Ready Committee members to have watched this part of the meeting tonight. I also encourage the commissioners to either attend our meeting next week or watch the video afterwards so that you all can get a sense for yourselves. It's not just me reporting to you what the committee is feeling, but you can all get that yourselves. I will give you all a little tip that I gave Debbie several months ago, is that sometimes watching this, you can on YouTube make it go a little faster. You can make everyone speak a little faster. It makes it a little bit more tolerable sometimes. So just a little tip to throw out there, but I think it'd be really helpful if you all, watch our meeting list next week also.
Yeah, Natalie?
May I ask a question about that? When we as a committee discussed who we wanted to recommend to the board, we did that in closed session. So will we be having this conversation in closed session or will it be an open session?
Good question. On what basis did we meet in closed session for that? Do you remember?
Well, because it's kind of like a hiring issue. You know what I mean? We were discussing candidates and the interviews and who we wanted to recommend to the board. So we treated it in the same way that we do in a board meeting when you're discussing staff or applicants in some kind of way.
Charlie, do you want to?
I think it would be appropriate to do in a closed session. And think of it as akin to if you were doing a job review of an employee. It's very similar to that. I am going to look at the statute to make sure that's right. But I'm leaning right now to think it should be in a closed session.
Matt Rogers, did you want to say something about that?
I think it's an open session because it's not the same as a personnel issue. Hiring a contractor or a consultant is no different than paying for a printer, not to make it sound like the two are in any way equivalent. But the executive session is really supposed to be used very, very rarely. And I don't believe that this is an appropriate use of that, but.
Well, if it's not, then we shouldn't, but I do want to look at the statute and decide whether we can or not.
Right.
I was wondering who iPhone 7 was. Hello, Anne.
Hi, Martha.
I'm not supposed to let you speak, but I see you turned your camera on. Would you like to chime in very quickly on that?
Total violation of Open Meetings Act. And I have just sent Deb and Matt, because I don't have anybody else's email or the Open Meetings Act, the latest. You may not go into open session to discuss the contract of Mr. Logan or to appoint board members. Absolutely a total
You mean
violation.
you can't go into closed session.
I'm sorry, executive session.
Yeah.
Yes, you may not do that. The rules are so simple and so clear. And I think there's 16 days. And please share that with everybody, especially your attorney.
Yeah, but that's neither of those things are what they would be doing.
Well, what would they be doing? You suggested they go into executive session to talk about something having to do with.
Not the two things that you said.
Well, clarify.
Well, I will after I review the statute. But essentially, it's akin to a performance review. And
No,
I
it's
don't
not.
know if we can go beyond an employee with respect to that.
No, you
Um,
can't. You
I
absolutely
don't, I
cannot.
don't recall.
All right, so
But
I'm
I'll
happy
look
to
at
let
the-
Charles do some research and give the right.
Yeah, I'm gonna look at the statute.
Well, I
so-
just sent it to you, so
Yeah.
you can do your
Well,
research.
Thank you.
I have it right here. I can
34
read it.
years of following the Open Meetings Act, and it's just, it's astonishing that you would go into executive session to even consider appointing a board member.
We're
and-
not
and-
appointing any board members.
I'm not talking to you, I'm talking to the board.
I don't know what you're talking about. I'm ready to move on.
Good.
That's
Okay,
rude,
so
Matt.
thank you for weighing in, and with your many years of
I will
experience.
send
and
the statute to you,
Yeah.
Martha.
Thank you.
I was just gonna ask you, Debbie, to do that. Thank you.
I will do it right
Um,
now.
I wanted to say before Ann chimed in that, and I don't know what relevance, this is ultimately gonna have, because we do need to just abide by the law, regardless. But here we are tonight in open session, talking extensively about an invoice we received, contract issues, et cetera, et cetera. And it seems a little bit weird that we would suddenly choose to go into closed session for the Ready Committee to talk about the exact same stuff when we've been open tonight. And frankly, I'm a little uncomfortable with some of this being talked about publicly, but if it's what we're supposed to do, then we're doing what we're supposed to do tonight.
All transparency.
Right. I mean, just because talking about an individual in such a public way and payments to individuals, it's not super comfortable, but transparency is very important. And so perhaps it just trumps, any privacy that somebody may want to have in that realm. So, okay, again, as Matt Mitchell said, I do think that we should move on. And unless anyone has anything additional to say on this entire discussion, which is still, technically in the heading of the Racial Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee update of our agenda, then we'll be moving on. So are there any final thoughts here? No. Okay. So in
Martha, just real fast before I leave you all, I
Oh,
just
yeah,
wanted
yeah.
to say thank you so much. I really, one of the things that I really respect about you all is that you think about things really thoroughly. The fiscal responsibility that the Park District is dedicated to having, I think, is just absolutely admirable. It's a shame that not all of our government can have that kind of fiscal responsibility. So I really just wanted to say thank you all so much.
Thank you, JC.
Good night, everybody.
Appreciate the positive comment. So again, moving into old business where the clarification for hiring contract employees remains, and that was Brian's item. So did you want to talk on that one tonight at all, Brian? Is he? Oh, there he is. Well, there's the thing. Okay.
Yeah, last month we discussed it and we left it to rediscuss this month because Martha, you weren't at the meeting. Matt Rogers added last month that he may add some suggestions in verbiage this month, and I don't know if we got any of that.
No, I mean, I'm fine if everybody else is with pushing this back an extra month, and I'll have something prepared for that month with Charles.
Sorry, what was it that Matt Rogers was going to be bringing us?
Some verbiage on the clarification, and he wanted you to be in the meeting because you were not present.
Right. Okay, but we're going to table this till next month because
Yes,
okay.
that's my request.
Okay, we don't have to vote to table, right? Remind me, somebody. Okay, so there's nothing in new business, and it's been a while since I was here last, but I think I had said that for call of the commissioners, rather than just calling everybody's name, we can kind of raise our hand and jump in. Is that what people remember? I don't know what was done while I wasn't here last month, but I
I
don't
didn't remember that, so I called everybody's name.
Oh, that's fine. That's
Sorry.
fine. I just don't necessarily want a roll call that people then say I have nothing. If you want to chime in with any call of the commissioner element, now is the time for that.
I'll jump.
Matt Rogers, I think you started speaking first. Do you want to go?
I did, but Matt Mitchell actually raised his hand and was polite, so I was going to defer to him. I would just like to say that I think it would be advantageous. I went through Open Meetings Act training last May when I joined the Plan Commission for the city. And I'm going through it again because they've drastically updated it to deal with digital meetings and remote meetings and things like that. So it might be worth everybody going through a refresher course on the Open Meetings Act, specifically in dealing with how do you deal with things in remote meetings and that sort of stuff. So that's just a recommendation. I don't know how exactly one signs up to do that. But maybe Natalie knows or Charles knows how one signs up to do that. I'm doing it again through the Land Use Commission. So the city of Evanston's putting me through it, but it might be advantageous for everybody because it sounds like they've revamped the program to deal with the realities of COVID now.
Are you referring to the Secretary of State's class?
I don't remember if it's the Secretary of State or the Attorney General.
You know, it's totally the Attorney General. I don't know why I said Secretary.
Okay, I was gonna say that sounded weird to me, but it's the Attorney General.
Yeah.
I would love to do that. I remember that the board member boot camp that's mandatory for every time somebody's newly elected to the board, or perhaps even reelected, because I had to do it recently for my second term. It was pretty light on substance for the OMA. I mean, I was really feeling like I didn't walk out of there with any better understanding than I walked in. So, Matt Rogers, you said you've done the training, but you're about to do the updated one. Is that what you said?
So they're
Okay.
going to put us all back through it because of the digital component that has been added in, which is new based on how do you work remotely in meetings and what do you have to do in order to abide by the Open Meetings Act when you're dealing in a situation like we're dealing in here.
Is the training itself virtual? Can we
Yes,
do it?
yes, it's all online.
Great.
Yeah.
And are you already scheduled for one, Matt?
I am not scheduled
Okay.
yet. I just know that they will be scheduling us in the next month or so to go through it.
Okay.
So I'm just putting that out there as a recommendation that, you know, it might be worthwhile for people. It's not a long time consuming thing, but you might pick up a little bit here or there on it, especially since they've kind of revamped it to deal with remote meetings.
Okay. If you don't mind sharing information, Matt, once you have more, perhaps about the actual date or how one would go about registering.
There isn't a date or anything. It's literally you get a link,
Oh,
you take the course at your time. You know, if you want to do it at 3 a.m. on Friday, you do it. If Debbie wants to do hers at 2 p.m. on Tuesday, you know,
do you happen to know, is it open to the public or is it only? For
that was my
people?
question that maybe Natalie or Charles could answer.
Yeah, so my recollection is that you could just get on the website and I mean, this was a few years ago. You could get on the website and do the training.
That's how it's been set up. With this updated one, Matt, I don't know if they've changed that, but it was a thing where you just go and do it.
I don't think it is. I'm just, like I said, the city always just sends a link and I use the link to go to it.
JC,
So it might-
did you do this training recently, JC?
Oh, you know
may
what?
not be
She might not be with us,
Yeah.
so. No, wait,
There.
she is.
She's
I'm
there.
back. No, I haven't done it yet.
Okay. But as long as I have my mic on, I've reviewed the Open Meetings Act. In section 2C, we can have a closed meeting here regarding this specific individual serving as an independent contractor for purposes of reviewing performance, employment, etc. On the other hand, I am thinking that, as Martha said, we've pretty much discussed everything as it is. So why even go to the trouble of doing that?
I'm ready for my call to the commissioners.
I'm sorry. I thought I got out of the meeting, but I just did something weird to my screen. I was trying to see if I could copy you all to this, but I'll just say that the attorneygeneral.gov website says, we're sorry, this section of the Illinois Attorney General's is currently down. Notice to public body members and Open Meetings Act designees who are required by blah blah section to complete the training curriculum. It says the web page is being repaired. Therefore, the training as well as the Freedom of Information Act electronic training are inaccessible. And there's no set completion date for the website repairs at this point. So I don't know if that's the same training that you're referring to, Matt, but hopefully if it is, they're fixing that soon.
Yes,
So-
I heard from somebody who took it recently, there were a couple glitches. So maybe they've taken it down to repair those glitches. But at some point, like I said, if we kind of continue, especially in this remote learning or in this remote meeting setting, it might be advantageous just to see. I don't know if there's a lot of new information on that or how much it is, but it might be worth exploring.
Okay, well, whenever it is that it's available again, if you happen to have that information and want to share it with the rest of us, that would be great, but
Yes,
I'll
that's
look into
fine.
it as well. Okay, Matt Mitchell, you were gonna jump in?
I did. I wanted to thank Brian and the grounds crew. The ice is great. Best in Evanston once again. My kids have really been enjoying it, and it's great to have an outdoor activity during COVID. So I appreciate it, Brian.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Call of the commissioners?
Yeah, not to add a completely somber note here at the end, but since our last meeting, ETHS was in a full lockdown for students bringing a gun to school, and I just wanted to extend our, the love and support from Ridgeville to the ETHS community, the teachers and students there.
Thank you, Mick. Anybody else who has not chimed in or wants to, I should say? Okay, I think that brings us to citizen comments. If we have any, anybody with us who wants to speak during citizen comment? And I don't think we do. But now's the time. Going, gone. All right, somebody could make a motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
Second,
And Julie, if you'd roll call the vote on that.
Ron,
yes.
Mitchell,
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Morale,
Yes.
Rogers,
No, I mean, yes, just kidding.
Gupta, and Gaines.
You can stay, Matt. We're gonna go. I vote yes. All right, thank you, everybody. Good night.
All right.
All right, good night.
Bye.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.